Welcome back, everybody, on a Overreaction Monday. Jeff Kolpak will join us coming up here in about 20 minutes. We are down to the final 8 in the FCS playoffs after this past weekend when all chalk. The top 8 seeds, the home teams all won. I think we had our poll question on Friday. Our voters said we thought 1 would advance. We got a couple. There was a couple scares for a bit, but ended up all the home teams won. As Sam Herder joins us, as he usually does in this time slot, to discuss everything happening around FCS football. We were just visiting off air about picking one team. I picked Rhode Island to try and beat Mercer. They almost did. That was my one road upset. But all the home teams won, which it is what it is in this era of FCS football where we're at. But I think we may have better games, this weekend.
Yeah, I think, you going back to the first round, looking ahead to the second round, we thought, okay, maybe Rhode Island could give Mercer a decent game, or Villanova UIW. But then after first round games and how those teams looked, I didn't feel too confident that there would be any road wins this last week. And I did think things would go chalk. Sometimes when you're doing predictions, you like to sneak in an upset here or there, but there are other times where I'm not going to pick an upset just to pick an upset. I didn't feel like there was going to be any road teams winning this week. And although there were some good games, like the 2 matchups I just mentioned were really close games. The final score for Abilene Christian, NDSU, and Tarleton State, South Dakota were 2-score-ish wins for the home teams, but they got pretty dicey there for a little bit for both teams. So this weekend we'll see. Just looking at the spreads right now, Montana State 11.5 favorite, NDSU 18.5, South Dakota State 16.5 point favorite, USD 6.5 point favorite over UC Davis, and so that could probably be the best game this weekend is Davis going to Vermillion.
Let's start with the Jacks. South Dakota State, again, is the quietest 2-time defending champ I can remember in any recent memory in any sport. They're just out there since the loss to the Bison. They've steadily got better. They handled Montana on Saturday. They're just going about their business, and they're dominating, Sam.
They are. I think they are. You could argue they're looking like the most complete team in the FCS right now, and I think maybe part of them being, quietly doing what they're doing, it could be kind of like a media thing too, because North Dakota State dominated for so long. South Dakota State has been at the top for the last couple of years, and Montana State is kind of the new story. And Montana State, you could also argue, looks like the most complete team in the FCS, and so it's kind of a lot of, attention going to Montana State. And then after NDSU beat South Dakota State, it's okay, are the Bison going to retake their throne, or are they back at the top? Meanwhile, South Dakota State, since that NDSU loss, it looked a little choppy again that next week against USD, but in recent weeks, I think is playing super well, and the offense continues to click. Gronowski probably had his best game this last weekend over Montana. And then, for a couple of weeks now, I've said that I think right now South Dakota State's defense is playing at just as high of a level as last year's defense, and last year's unit was historically good. And I think numbers and analytics and just eye test are continuing to show that maybe the Jacks are just as good defensively this year as they were last year. And so in a sense, it does kind of seem like quietly they are kind of going about their business, but right now they're tied as far as the best odds to win the national title. They're tied with Montana State, slightly ahead of North Dakota State. And so maybe they're quietly going about it, but maybe they're also, people are kind of waiting to see, what they're going to do. More
red flags for you after the game last week, North Dakota State or South Dakota, and how they won?
Probably North Dakota State's. With that said, I still feel more confident in NDSU advancing further than USD in the brackets. But the reason I say North Dakota State, just because I think the scheme that Tarleton runs is so hard to defend. They're I guess you would call it RPO, but they chuck it downfield and they're so patient with it. It's just really hard to kind of scheme up against that. And so when Tarleton had offensive success against USD, I kind of go, okay, that's a concern in a sense, because the really talented DBs for USD, kind of got taken advantage of, but at the same time, they're not going to see an offense like that again. Meanwhile, North Dakota State, there's nothing I guess, fancy or unorthodox about Abilene Christian's offensive scheme. They're just really good,
Yeah.
offensively, wide receivers, quarterback, running backs, and it's kind of the type of offense that does give NDSU trouble. You spread the defense out with multiple wide receivers that can make plays. You lighten the box for a really good running back. We kind of saw that with UIW a couple of years
Yep.
ago, and so Abilene Christian having success on NDSU's defense, I guess, wasn't as much of a surprise. But that's now three-ish games in a row now where teams have found success passing the ball on NDSU, and so I think that is a concern. I don't This week I don't think it's a concern. I don't think
Yeah.
Mercer is going to do much against NDSU offensively, but looking ahead to next week, South Dakota State, their passing attack is starting to roll. And so that's where maybe you go. That could be a concern for NDSU, the secondary next week. This week, I just don't think Mercer is going to find much success, honestly, on the Bison
Let
defense.
me ask you this going forward, as we're looking for teams always to rise up. For Tarleton and Abilene, they're obviously there's a ton of players in the state of Texas. That's got to bode well for the FCS. Those two teams had the kind of showings they did, that they're good. I thought Abilene would be good. They were better than I thought. Defensively, they still got some work to do. Offensively, they're going to find guys that can play there.
Yeah, in the game, kind of how I thought the game flow was going to go was they were both going to give South Dakota and NDSU a scare in
Yeah.
the first half, just because the offenses, the speed, the athletes in space. Obviously, both USD and NDSU knew that was coming, but until you see it, you don't know. And so I thought it could be a close game at halftime, and then the defenses would adjust. Then the physicality would kind of take over. And we saw that with USD in the second half of the
Yes.
fourth quarter. It just took a little bit longer than I expected. I thought they would pull away in the third quarter. NDSU, I thought would pull away more in the second half as well, which they kind of did, yet Abilene kind of hung around. It was a
Right.
10-point game. And so the game flow of it was kind of what I expected, but I just thought NDSU and USD would pull away later after making defensive adjustments and the offensive physicality just kind of taking over, which we did see eventually. It just took a bit longer than I expected. And
Yeah.
so Tarleton and Abilene, they did compete better and longer than what I did expect.
Yeah, and that's the thing with I mentioned the Bison game was weird. They scored half 100, they forced 3 turnovers, and yet I don't think they played very well.
Yeah, kind of came out flat, in a sense.
Yep.
Obviously, the flip side of that is, Abilene just, probably saw some stuff that they could take advantage of, and so, yeah, I don't know if I don't think NDSU is going to see an offense like that again. Mercer is they kind of hang their hat defensively, especially their run defense.
Yeah.
Obviously South Dakota State, their passing attack is gotten it rolling, lately, but they do things differently than Abilene Christian. If NDSU does make it to Frisco, they'll probably face Montana State, and again, that's a different type of offense than Abilene Christian. So it's kind of like, in a sense, it's kind of like facing a triple option back in the day in the FCS playoffs. If your defense kind of struggles with it, you go, well, okay, that's a concern, but at the same time, the team is not going to see an offense like that again the rest of the way. You can kind of say that about Abilene Christian. The Bison aren't going to see an offense like that again the rest of this playoff bracket.
Give us, for fans up here that don't follow the division super closely, the 4-on-1 on Mercer. This is a team that's slowly been building over the last few years. They made the playoffs last year. They lost to the Jacks in the second round. Now they've taken the next step further, won the SoCon, and are into the quarterfinals for the first time.
Yeah, a program that we talk about it a lot, but I do think they do have potential. They have a pretty strong following. Their stadium is kind of like ETSU's, but they fill it out pretty well. Just going to SoCon Media Days, I kind of talked to some of their associate athletic directors, marketing people, and I think they realize where they stand kind of in the area of where they fit in and the landscape in that area. They're kind of surrounded by FBS teams, but they do things the right way to kind of attract fans to their games. They have like pregame concerts and stuff like that, and so and obviously there's a lot of talent there as well. Offensively, I don't think I said it earlier. I don't think they're going to find much success on NDSU's defense this weekend, but Mercer defensively. Passing defense isn't very good, but they are pretty stout against the run. We'll see how that holds up. We also thought UT Martin was stout against the run, statistically speaking, and that didn't go well against Montana State. And so I do think it is an interesting matchup. I really like the hire they made, and Coach Jacobs. He had success at the D2 level. kind of a bold hire, because I had heard that Brian Bohannon of Kennesaw State actually interviewed for that job last year around this time, and they took a chance on a Division II head coach. Just talking with folks at Mercer, he obviously knows how to run a program, but like when you see it up and close, like how he does things day to day, he's very, very impressive. And so I think it's a program on the rise. And will they threaten NDSU this weekend? I'm kind of doubtful there, but I do think they have potential to keep on building off of this.
They've held 5 teams to single digits in games. That I don't care. I know the quality of competition is what it is. That's still impressive. 5 teams they've done that to.
Yeah, and again, they are susceptible to the pass, but their rush defense, is pretty stout. And I know if you just kind of go through their schedule, you'll see 55 points given up to Samford, but I think Samford scored two defensive touchdowns in the fourth quarter there, and then in the first quarter of that game, Mercer had like 4 turnovers, and they all led to 28 points, and so a lot of those points were kind of allowed, by the offense. I think that was kind of, you can kind of push that aside. That doesn't show how good Mercer's defense is, giving up 55 points. But again, we'll see. Maybe they hold up to NDSU's rushing attack for 3.5 quarters, and Cam Miller has a big game. And then all of a sudden, that rushing attack for NDSU kind of leans on them a little bit. They don't have terrific size or anything like that, but they do have, some linebackers that can thump and, who are pretty physical in the middle there.
This is the 4th separate SoCon team the Bison have played now in the quarterfinal round. They've had Wofford, they've seen Samford come up here, ETSU, and now Mercer coming here. And I think they're similar in a lot of ways. And I think this Mercer team fits the bill of those other teams that NDSU has seen in this particular round.
Yeah, and you go back to that ETSU game in the quarters and the Samford game. It wasn't total domination by NDSU. It was kind of just like a slow burn. Correct. Where those SoCon teams hung tough for a half, but you were kind of just waiting for NDSU to make it a 2-score lead, and then maybe a 17-point lead in the second half, and we could see something like that again. Again, I think Mercer's rushing defense can hang tough for a little bit, but when NDSU just keeps on coming at you, with the power run game, eventually the dam usually breaks, because there's not a lot of FCS teams with defensive depth. I think Montana State has great depth on the defensive side, USD and South Dakota State, as well. And so their 2s can hang well, but for a lot of these other teams, their 1s can hang tough, but once it gets down to the 2s, that's when I think you see some separation. Before
we let you go, the best game of the weekend is the only game streaming in my mind, and that's the South Dakota Davis matchup. Davis looked awesome in its win over Illinois State. What do we make of this? And I think this is a coin flip game, honestly, on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this one on who I'm going to go with. I still really like how USD is built, but then on the flip side, there's just something about this UC Davis team where they're playing with confidence in a swagger, and I think they get that from from their coach. And it's like a good swagger. It's not like an overly cocky or arrogant where it kind of makes you mad. Like it's a good swagger. Confidence that they have, and they're well built as well. I think UC Davis is stout against the run. Offensively, Miles Hastings has played at a really good level. Lan Larison seems to have a little extra juice, about him. Maybe trying to. You can't convince voters otherwise. The voting results are already in.
Correct.
But I think he felt that he should have been one of the top 3 in Frisco for the Walter Payton Award, and there's obviously a good argument that he should have been, but this is his last go around now, and I think Lan Larison is probably going to be an NFL draft pick with what he can do running the ball, catching the ball, special teams. He's a unique talent, and I think They give him the ball in a lot of different ways, and so I think he's going to do everything in his power to kind of pop some big plays and spring an upset on the road this weekend.
Can't wait to see it play out. Thanks for the time as always, bud. Have a great week, and we'll do this again next Monday. We're down to the Final Four, all right?
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday. Give us the lowdown on what's going on across the FCS. We'll break. We'll wrap up hour 1. Big second hour on tap. Jeff Kolpak will join us. Tom Miller has the lowdown on Eric Schmidt getting the UND job. It's all ahead as Hot Mike rolls on. We're back after this.